Tommy and I left school together as per my mother's advice. She was stuck at the ER. The buses weren't running due to the snowstorm, and I lived much too far to safely get back home. Tommy, on the other hand, lived a mere 10 minutes from our school, and as we were good friends, it seemed smartest to go with him until she was able to get me. I liked Tommy enough, and looked forward to checking out the epic video game collection he frequently bragged about. So this was perfectly fine with me. My mom explained she talked to his mother previously, and he was waiting near the entrance, where I found him in his puffy coat, scarf wrapped and ready, and gloves locked and loaded like mine, waving. Flurries filled the sky, dimming the sun to an almost misty veil, beautiful and serene despite the howling wind. The lack of road traffic added to the surreal environment, and I realized how alone we truly were as we started off on our short walk behind the field to Tommy's place. It was too windy to talk. I tried a few times, but he cocked his head squinting, clearly unable to hear amidst the heavy gust. So I figured I'd wait to tell him about the new comic I'd found. A muffled crackling sound seemed to echo from the woods to the right. We both stopped dead, only our wide, uncovered eyes capable of displaying the fear we both had felt. "Let's get the hell out of here," I yelled over the wind to Tommy, answered by his rapid nodding, and we began trudging as fast as the snow would allow. A sudden gust of wind blinded us as we walked directly into it, freezing my lashes and causing me to squint heavily. I called over, expecting a reply, but only the howling wind was heard as it screamed into my face with an arctic gust and another cracking sound. "Tommy!" I called out, shielding my eyes with my heavy gloves, but I couldn't see him anywhere. I backtracked to see if he'd fallen in the increasingly limited visibility, only then finding his footprints a bit back, angling off to my left. Realizing I must have missed him turning, I began following his steps, deep set into the fresh snow, while calling his name, to no reply. A few meters in, the footprints spread as if he was running, and concern grew in my subconscious that quickly changed to fear. The steps seemed not only spaced farther apart in sprint, but the left and right prints began to get increasingly farther apart as well, as if his stance had widened exponentially. I realized he might be running side to side in silly steps, playing games. So I said, "Stop goofing around, Tommy. Slow the hell down," trying not to seem like the kid I was. The steps grew impossibly wider apart, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet between, and they kept increasing before a spattering of red began to fleck the snow in the space between them. I began hyperventilating and pulled my inhaler from my pocket when I heard it again. The horrible cracking shook the forest with an echo, the sound we'd heard before, realizing it sounded less like tree branches and more wet and crisp. I listened deep to what sounded like heavy breathing, barely audible in the breaks from the heavy gust of wind coming from the trees ahead. On either side of the growing, dark red trail, the footsteps vanished into the heavy woods, where I saw 2 small reflecting circles, the size of human eyes about 5 feet apart, blink from the shadows within. I turned back and I ran, following my footprints as best as I could, with my lungs and heart pounding under my heavy coat. When I got back to school, Tommy was standing there in his coat, scarf, and gloves, asking me where the hell I'd been at and why I was shaking so hard. He then led me in the other direction on that short walk to his house, away from those woods. In 1993, I was living in Camden, Maine. I moved there 3 months before from Pennsylvania. It was wonderful, miles of coastline and forest. Mount Batty was a park in Camden. You could drive the mountain or hike. Look east to the bay and you would see ships. Look north and you could watch the skiers on the slope a half a mile away. Down the road I was told about trails that you can hike for miles, One winter, being a hiker, I loaded up my dog and got a map and went for a January hike. Snow was in the air, but I just couldn't wait. We went. After about 2 hours of following the trail through mountains, it started snowing real hard, almost a whiteout. My dog loved it, and so did I. It was a feeling of magic in the air and snow. I came across an open field, maybe about 300 feet of open space. My dog became scared and ran in circles barking. I thought maybe a bear was near. I looked around and could see all around me. No trees, just open field. My dog started going crazy. Now I'm worried. I started calling for my dog, nowhere in sight. I could hear her barking and running away. This was 1 or 2 minutes of me looking around in an open field, and there was nothing. I turned to my left, and there is this man standing about 3 feet from me. I almost fell over from shock. Where did this guy come from? I backed off about 5 feet and looked at him. At the time I was so shocked to think clearly, so I just said, "Where did you come from?" He was over 6 feet and pure white, like a plastic doll. He didn't answer me, so I turned around because I heard my dog again far away. It was 3 or 4 seconds, and I turned back around, and he was gone. It was snowing like hell all of a sudden, and I started looking this way and that. No one. All there was my footprints in the snow. I started getting out of there. About 20 feet down the trail, I saw a footprint alongside my half-snow-covered print. As I walked, there was another print about 10 feet away, new and fresh. Every 10 feet another, all going the opposite way. I tried running and jumping to match the strides of the prints. No way I could do it. I'm 6 foot and could not match the stride. It was going the way I came in, so I followed it, still hearing my dog. All of a sudden, with fresh snow, my old prints pretty much covered. They disappeared. I followed my prints to get back out the way I came. When I got back to my truck, my dog was underneath it and not willing to get out from under the truck. I'm part American Indian, and I've heard stories about wood sprites. They can take the shape of people, but look fake if you look close. I think that is what I ran into that day. A week or so later, I went back the same way as before. I never found that open field again, only mountain trails. I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night a few years ago, we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. So far from the main roads, and on the weekend, I knew our roads will remain unplowed for quite some time. I went to my deck out back to admire the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries when I noticed footprints leading to my door, then turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later as it was early to call their parents. I went on Facebook, and after scrolling for a bit, I noticed one of my neighbors closer to the entrance posted, "Did someone knock for me or something at my back door?" I immediately called her and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough, they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end, and they told me there was none there. Then I got a call from my next-door neighbor. She called the woman that lives next to the in-house. She said that there were footprints that led to her door, but none that led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said that it's an emergency now. They told us the roads are still unplowed, and they can't send a plow truck to clear the way as they are a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, huge bear of a man, across the road from her, texted her to say he was coming over to invite her over. He came and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras, facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m., a plow truck came, as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with and her went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time only one came up. He took her to the side room, and we could hear hysterical crying. By now, we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door when several police confronted us. They told us they found someone hiding under a cover opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little campout, they found blankets she just cleaned and put away. She stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then, she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. The cops told us that they feel like he didn't want to stay at his apartment after a fight with his roommate and drove off in his roommate's car from the county over and got stuck in our unplowed roads. We all were called as witnesses in the case, and he took some electronics from her basement. Couldn't get him on that since he never left with the stuff. It was about 4 months of court. Last winter, I was involved in sort of an accident that still puzzles me to today. Since then, I've told a few of my good friends, and none of them could come up with any possible explanations for my tale. So, I've decided to share my experience here in hopes of receiving some closure, or at least a clue on what could have possibly happened, even though I don't think I will. The whole happening took place during a drive up to visit my parents in North Dakota. My mother had been complaining that I didn't visit frequently enough, so I decided to spend a few days in my childhood home. Since my girlfriend was immobilized by the flu, I had been making the extensive drive on my own. My strategy for the trip was to power through it using willpower and caffeine, but I soon realized that might not have been the best plan. After around 7 hours of driving, I felt extremely groggy and heavily exhausted. I had ended up on an endless snow-covered road that was surrounded by a sea of evergreens. My windshield was being buffeted by heavy clumps of North Dakota snow, and I was just about at my breaking point. As I stared ahead at the panorama of my headlights, I thought about how nice it would be to sleep this whole venture off. However, I was surprisingly interrupted as a white car flew past me from my left. I was immediately brought back to attention. I glanced at the white car as it sped in front of me at speeds highly exceeding the speed limit. I hadn't seen a car for a few hours and was bewildered to have one find me at 2 in the morning. The snow was coming down rapidly now, and I could hardly see the vehicle, despite it only being a few yards in front of me. I could see as the driver recklessly sped down the isolated road, as his tires churned up a barrage of white powder. I didn't really feel comfortable being so close, so I slowly eased off. Though the hum of my car and the pounding of snow, I could begin to hear the sound of tires swerving. The car in front of me had begun to sway back and forth on the slippery back road. I was having one of those moments where reality doesn't make sense. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me. After a few swift jerks, the white car made a sharp turn to the right and launched itself airborne. I slammed the brakes as my body went numb from the sight. My car slowly came to a halt as I watched the white turn over and over several times until it came to a stop with its wheels down. I breathed heavily as I gripped my steering wheel as hard as I could. All I could think of how much of a jackass this person was and how we both could have been killed, although I didn't know if he was still alive. After a few moments of collecting myself, I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out of my car. My body was weak from the terror, and I could hardly see through the thick precipitation. However, I still began to walk toward the totaled car to see if the idiot driver was all right. After trekking through the slippery ice, I arrived at the mess of a vehicle. The front 2 tires were blown out. The hood was torn off, and the windshield was completely shattered. I wondered how anybody could survive something like this. I made my way over to the driver's side door, and after some nervous hesitation, nudged it open. Inside, I could see a coat of bright blood which covered the entire front half. I almost threw up at the sick sight, but was able to hold it down. Although the blood lay fresh on the seats and steering wheel, I could find no bodies inside the car. I peered in to see if the driver was in the back, but it too was empty. After a few seconds of confusion, I searched the area around the car for a body, but could not find one. However, as I steadily scanned the woods, something did catch my eye. In the distance, I could see a tall man wearing a large coat, casually walking into the forest. A trail of blood followed after him as he kept his eyes forward and never turned to see me. "Hello?" I screamed after him. No answer. "Are you all right?" Still no answer. I watched the man until he was out of my vision, puzzled at how someone could walk away so nonchalantly from a debilitating accident like that. After starting to feel a little nervous, I went back into my car and drove off to the first town I could find. I told the local police, and after a short search, I was told to continue on my way. I still have no explanation about this man. He could have possibly had brain damage and was just wandering into the forest. I'm not sure, but I doubt he's alive anymore. I feel terrible that I didn't go after him, but in my defense, I was consumed by fear. For some reason, this man had an odd walk that I had never seen before. It made me believe that he was not like me, but instead something else.